Someone in your life is controlling you. And the unsettling part is you probably didn't notice it right away. It doesn't start with shouting or obvious dominance. It starts small. You pack your bags and they quietly redo it. You send an email and they correct every word. Not because it's wrong, but because it's not their way. And at first you tell yourself it's nothing. But then something shifts. You hesitate before making simple decisions. You replay conversations in your head. You start asking yourself, is this okay? About things you used to do naturally. And without realizing it, you begin adjusting, anticipating their reactions, editing yourself before they ever say a word. That's when control stops being external and starts living inside your mind. Because being controlled isn't always loud. It's not always forceful. Sometimes it feels like pressure you can't quite explain, like you're slowly being reshaped into a version of yourself that makes someone else more comfortable. Until one day, you notice something deeply unsettling. You don't feel like yourself anymore. You feel careful, measured, slightly on edge, like you're always trying to get it right, even when nothing is technically wrong. We call people like this control freaks. We assume they're dominant, power-hungry, maybe even manipulative. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if the person trying to control everything isn't driven by power at all? What if they're driven by something much quieter and much more dangerous? Fear. We've been taught to see control in a very specific way. When someone micromanages, corrects everything, or needs things done their way, we label them quickly. Dominant, difficult, power-hungry. It looks like confidence. It feels like authority. And from the outside, it's easy to assume they like being in control. But that's the lie, because real power doesn't need to control everything. Real power is flexible. It trusts. It allows space for mistakes. What you're looking at instead is something much more fragile. Extreme control is not a sign of strength. It's a sign of internal instability. A person who needs to control every detail isn't calm inside. They're managing something you can't see, a constant undercurrent of tension, a fear that if they let go, even for a moment, everything will fall apart. So they step in, they correct, they take over, not to dominate you, but to regulate themselves. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. That controlling boss, that overbearing partner, that person who just has to fix everything, they're not operating from confidence. They're operating from fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing control and what that might cost them. So what looks like power is actually protection. And what looks like control is often just anxiety in disguise. To understand a controlling person, you have to step inside their mind. Because from the outside, it looks like confidence, decisive, organized, always in charge. But on the inside, it feels nothing like that. It feels like pressure, a constant, low-level tension running in the background. Their mind doesn't rest. It scans, it anticipates. It tries to predict every possible outcome before it happens. Not because they want to, but because they feel like they have to. If I don't double check this, but something might go wrong. If something goes wrong, it will be my fault. And if it's my fault, I'll have to deal with the consequences alone. That's the loop. It's not about the task itself. It's about what the task represents. Risk, uncertainty, the possibility of failure. And their body reacts to that possibility as if it's a real threat. Tight chest, restless thoughts, a subtle but persistent sense of urgency. Relaxing doesn't feel safe, because relaxing means letting go, and letting go feels dangerous. So they step in, they fix, they correct. Not because they think you're incapable, but because their nervous system doesn't trust the unknown. That's why they struggle to delegate, why they rewrite your work, Why they ask for updates, details, reassurance. It's not control for the sake of control. It's control as a way to calm the chaos inside. But here's the part most people miss. They're just as trapped as you are. Because the more they control, the less safe they actually feel. Their world becomes smaller, tighter, more rigid. There's no room for error. No room to breathe. And over time, they stop trusting, not just others, but life itself. So what you're seeing isn't someone trying to overpower you. It's someone trying, desperately, to outrun a feeling they don't know how to face. Beneath the need to control, there's an engine quietly driving everything. And that engine has three core parts: anxiety, shame, and a desperate need for certainty. The first is anxiety. Not always loud, not always visible, but always there. It's the feeling that something could go wrong at any moment, that things are more fragile than they appear, and that, if you're not careful enough, fast enough, precise enough, you'll miss it. So the mind stays alert, hyper-focused, trying to stay one step ahead of chaos, but anxiety alone isn't what makes control so intense. Underneath it, there's something deeper, something more painful: shame. A quiet internal belief that says, if I mess this up, it means something about me. Not just that the situation failed, but that I failed. That I'm not good enough, not capable, not worthy of trust. And when mistakes feel like a threat to your identity, perfection stops being optional. It becomes necessary. That's where the need for certainty comes in. Control creates the illusion of certainty. If everything is planned, checked, and done correctly, then nothing bad can happen. No surprises, no judgment, no failure. At least, that's what the brain hopes, because certainty feels safe, predictable, contained. But life doesn't work that way. So the person keeps tightening their grip, trying to eliminate every unknown, every variable, every possible mistake, not because they want control for its own sake, but because uncertainty feels unbearable. And in their mind, control isn't about being right. It's about not being exposed. No one is born needing to control everything. This pattern is learned, quietly, gradually, often long before the person even realizes it. And in most cases, it begins in childhood. Imagine growing up in an environment where things felt unpredictable. Maybe the adults in your life were emotionally inconsistent, warm one moment, distant or explosive the next. Maybe there was constant tension in the background, arguments, instability, a feeling that something could go wrong at any time. As a child, you don't have the power to change that environment, but you adapt, you become hyper-aware, you start paying attention to every detail, every shift in tone, every subtle signal. Control becomes your way of creating safety in a world that didn't feel safe. But sometimes the story looks completely different on the surface. Some people grow up in environments that are overly controlled. Strict rules, high expectations, no room for mistakes, no space to choose, to explore, to fail. In those homes, love can feel conditional, something you earn by getting things right. And over time, a belief forms: if I'm not perfect, I won't be accepted. So control becomes a way to avoid rejection, a way to maintain worth. There's also another layer that often goes unnoticed: moments of deep emotional impact, a betrayal, a sudden loss, a time when something fell apart and no one was there to help you process it. The brain remembers those moments. It creates a rule: losing control leads to pain. And from that point on, it does everything it can to prevent that experience from happening again. This is the blueprint. What you're seeing in a controlling adult isn't just personality. It's a survival strategy that was built early, reinforced over time, and never fully questioned. And underneath all of it, there's often a younger version of them, still trying to feel safe in a world that once wasn't. If control is rooted in fear, then why does it feel so good in the moment? Why does someone keep doing it, even when it's clearly damaging their relationships? Because control works, at least temporarily, The moment they step in, fix something, or take over, the anxiety drops, the uncertainty disappears, everything feels contained again, predictable, manageable. For a brief moment, their mind goes quiet, and that relief is powerful. It's not just psychological, it's neurological. The brain registers that sense of order as safety, and safety releases tension. It creates a small but noticeable sense of reward. Not joy exactly, but relief. And the brain learns quickly. Do this again. That's how control becomes addictive. Every time uncertainty appears, the same cycle begins. Anxiety rises. The urge to control kicks in. They act, correcting, managing, tightening their grip. And again, they feel that temporary calm. The brain links control with survival, with safety, with being okay. But here's the trap. The relief never lasts, because life is unpredictable. Something always shifts, something always goes wrong. And when it does, the anxiety comes back, often stronger than before. So they respond the only way they know how, by controlling even more. What started as a coping mechanism slowly becomes a dependency. They're no longer choosing control, they need it. And the more they rely on it, the less tolerance they have for uncertainty. Small disruptions feel overwhelming, minor mistakes feel catastrophic. Their world becomes tighter, more rigid, more exhausting to maintain. So even though control feels like safety, it quietly takes that safety away, leaving them stuck in a cycle where the only way to feel okay is to keep controlling everything. Control doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small everyday moments, the kind you could easily dismiss if you're not paying attention. At work, it looks like micromanagement. A manager who needs to be copied on every email, who rewrites your sentences, questions your decisions and checks in constantly. Not because the work is failing, but because not knowing feels unbearable. It's never really about the task. It's about the anxiety behind it. In relationships, it becomes more personal. It shows up as constant check-ins, needing to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. It can look like giving advice that slowly turns into direction, then expectation, then pressure. Over time, it stops feeling like care and starts feeling like control. And in everyday life, it hides in routines, over-planning every detail, getting irritated when things don't go as expected, feeling disproportionately stressed over small disruptions, a delayed plan, a minor mistake, something slightly out of place. Because again, it's not about the small thing. It's about what the small thing represents: uncertainty, loss of control, the possibility that something might go wrong. And for someone wired this way, even a small deviation can trigger a much bigger internal reaction. What makes this pattern so difficult to spot is that it often looks reasonable on the surface. Being organised, being responsible, wanting things done well, none of those are problems on their own. But when the need for control starts overriding flexibility, when it creates tension, pressure, or fear in others, that's when it crosses the line. Because control isn't defined by the action itself, it's defined by the need behind it. If you step back and observe closely, controlling behaviour doesn't happen randomly. It follows a pattern, a loop that repeats itself over and over again. It usually starts with something small, a change in plans, a delay, a detail that feels uncertain. On the surface it's minor, but internally it triggers something much bigger. Anxiety rises, the mind starts racing. What if this goes wrong? What if I miss something? What if this gets out of control? That discomfort builds quickly, and the person feels an urgent need to do something, to regain stability. So they act, they step in, take over, correct, control. They send more messages, they double-check everything. They tighten their grip on the situation, and for a brief moment, it works. The anxiety drops. The world feels ordered again, predictable, safe. But then comes the consequence. The people around them start to feel it, the pressure, the lack of trust, the constant vmешательство into their space. And naturally, they react, they pull away, they resist, they become distant or frustrated. And this is where the loop turns, because that resistance feels like something slipping out of control again. The anxiety comes back, stronger this time. Now it's not just about the situation, it's about the relationship, the tension, the emotional distance. So the person responds the only way they know how. They control more. And the cycle repeats. The tighter they grip, the faster everything slips away. What started as a way to feel safe becomes the very thing that creates instability. And over time, this loop doesn't just strain situations, it slowly erodes trust, connection, and peace. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they don't know how to feel safe without control. At first, control feels like protection. It feels like you're holding everything together, keeping things from falling apart, preventing mistakes, making sure nothing goes wrong. But over time, something unexpected begins to happen. The very thing you're trying to protect starts to slip away. In relationships, the shift is subtle at first. People become quieter, less open. They stop sharing as much, not because they don't care, but because it no longer feels safe to be themselves. Every choice feels monitored. Every action feels evaluated. And eventually, they stop showing up fully. Not out of rebellion, but out of exhaustion. Because no one thrives under constant pressure. No one feels close when they feel controlled. And slowly, distance replaces connection. At work, it shows up differently, but the outcome is the same. Teams lose motivation. Creativity drops. People stop taking initiative because they know it will be corrected anyway. So they disengage, they do the minimum, or they leave, and the controlling person is left confused. I'm just trying to make things better. I'm the one holding everything together. But that's the paradox. The more they try to control, the more they create the very outcome they fear: disconnection, resistance, loss. And internally, the cost is just as high: constant tension, chronic stress, a nervous system that never truly relaxes. Because when you believe everything depends on you, there's no room to rest. In the end, they don't just lose control of situations, they lose trust, they lose connection. And sometimes, they lose the people they were trying so hard to keep, not because they didn't care, but because control quietly replaced love. If you've recognized yourself in this, if you feel like you've been holding everything too tightly, there's something important you need to understand. You were never trying to control people. You were trying to feel safe. And that changes everything. Because it means this isn't about fixing your personality. It's about learning a new way to relate to fear. The first step is awareness. The next time you feel the urge to correct, to step in, to take over, pause. Ask yourself one simple question. Am I doing this because it truly matters, or because I feel anxious? And be honest with the answer. Then start small. Let something be imperfect. Let someone do things differently. Let a plan change, without immediately fixing it. And notice what happens, not outside, but inside. The discomfort will be there. That's normal, but so is the realization that nothing actually collapsed. This is how you rebuild trust. Not in the world being predictable, but in your ability to handle what isn't. And if you're on the other side, dealing with someone who needs to control everything, remember this: their behavior comes from fear, but that doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. Set clear boundaries, stay calm, and don't take responsibility for emotions that aren't yours to carry. Because real safety doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from knowing that even when things don't go your way, you'll still be okay. If this video made you feel seen, or helped you understand someone in your life a little better, take a moment to share your experience in the comments. And if you want more content that explores the deeper, quieter parts of the human mind, consider subscribing to the channel. You're not alone in this, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. Thank you for watching.